Okay, great. Thanks. Welcome, everyone, to the May 7th meeting. We had 3 weeks off and packed agenda. Are there any public comments or general announcements to start with? All right. Hearing none. Going to the minutes. And I noticed one relatively quick off the top. I don't believe that I was the one who made a motion to approve the minutes. I think I requested the motion to approve the minutes. I think that is an oddity of the chair's position. It
Can't call for a motion.
Can't make the motion themselves.
Great, okay, I will look at the recording and see if I can send.
Yeah.
Does anyone remember who called for the motion?
I actually think it was Gary, and I don't believe I remember this, but I think it's Laura. I think. On that.
Okay.
I don't remember either.
Yeah, I don't remember either. Just pick somebody.
Thanks for clarifying that.
All right, anyone else see any comments in the minutes? I thought they were very good.
I had no other comments.
Appropriate level of detail it felt like to you?
Yeah.
And this is AI.
No, this is my heavy filtering of the AI. The AI was useful, but when it came time to write it, I did end up doing
Oh, okay.
a decent amount of rewriting just because I think, it's really remarkable how much the AI captures, but kind of summarizing things into more meaningful statements of what actually was discussed did take a little filtering. But it was nice to have the play-by-play.
Oh, that's
that was
great.
mostly accurate, so this definitely made it faster.
Yeah. I did notice that in my own searches recently, if you have a you know how if in a search field you mistype something, it says, did you mean, like coordination versus like cooperative or something? The AI results just immediately go to like whatever it assumes you meant.
Right.
And with very dramatically different
Right.
in the results.
So amazingly helpful or amazingly unhelpful, depending on where it goes.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, so still takes a human. My recommendation is that you not correct that AI so that AI is always behind, because if you teach it how to, if you teach it how to interpret it, it will only get better.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes
Thank you,
as
Laura.
amended.
I'll
Can I get a
second.
I saw Reed's hand first, but
Okay. Sure.
Gary had the verbal, so, great, all in favor of approving the minutes, with the amendment as noted on number 3.
All right. Oh, sorry.
Aye.
Aye, sorry.
Okay, any any opposed? No, hearing none, motion carries. And we are off. So, packed agenda, I'm just pulling it up right now as my computer warms up. So we've got a planner update, a report from Green Up Day, probably from Laura, because she's in there, thanks. ERF prioritization strategy, we've got a nice color handout for that discussion. And then the Fournier project at 8:15 to 8:20. And then we'll close with further discussions on what we want to cover in 2 weeks. All right, any additions or amendments to that agenda? Great, let's do it. Dave, for you.
So we'll jump in. I'm gonna try to cover a bunch of little things in 10 minutes. Kind of some follow-up from our last session and some things that have happened in the interim 3 weeks. So a couple of minor things. So Gary, I did confirm that the rabies oral vaccine baits are harmless for dogs. if anything, they'll get a booster shot if a dog happens to get into a bait. So that's been all improved. We took a couple of parcels off the list that USDA had approved or had suggested for bait stations just because they didn't make sense, and we gave them the notes to avoid trails and recreation areas at Jacob Krantz in that Rosendale Park, which they had also proposed. That's a good park.
Yeah. Industrial.
I did locate a goal statement, not quite a charter, but if you look up here on the screen, this is, I think, the closest thing I could locate in our documents. Williston Conservation Commission goal statement from 1987.
I like it.
It's
The archives.
So I won't take time to read this now, but I'll share this with you.
Oh, revised.
Yeah, revised, so,
Updated.
I thought that was 2007 for a second, but no, it's not.
Yeah, it looks like it's mainly outlining the areas of, kind of interest in terms of the purview of the Conservation Commission. So that might be
Yeah.
useful with respect to the conversation about putting together, documents to help
Mhm.
onboard new members. And perhaps it might be something that's worth revisiting or revising at some point in the future.
While you're bringing this up about the onboarding, being useful for onboarding, one thing that occurred to me is, types of landscape buffers are one thing we almost never refresh ourselves on, and yet they come up often
All the
on
time.
development reviews. And we're like, wait, what's a type 2 buffer? So we probably need a, quick reference on the buffers even for current commissioners. It would save us time.
Wetlands?
No, just landscaping buffers. Not watershed protection buffers, but actually just like types of landscaping buffers, like which ones have taller trees, which ones have sparse plantings, which ones have type,
Oh, yeah.
there's like type 1,
Right,
type
there's
2,
four
type 3,
types.
just. I don't know
Reed,
that I
is
can type that.
part of that like setbacks from, other property, and is that a piece of the buffers? Is that what you? Or is that different?
Typically, yes, what's coming to mind for me is when development reviews come through and there's either visual screening or I don't even know the different reasons that buffers get proposed or required in the bylaws, but there are reasons in certain cases where a buffer is expected and the type of buffer matters. And so like with the Blazer parcel, we saw a type of buffer was being put in one place. And we said, well, that's not actually going to help wildlife at all. But if we put different type of buffer in a different place, it will have somewhat of a beneficial impact. So just trying to understand without having to ask every time, wait, what type of buffer is that?
Okay.
Back to the goal statement, it definitely reads, like pretty like early on. Do you have any idea when the commission was founded versus when this was written up?
I don't know, I can probably find out.
It looks really like foundational is my guess. And knowing that the ERF started, if I'm remembering it correctly, it was in that early 90s period, right?
89, 90. I
Yeah,
think 89 was like the actual creation of it, and 90 was the first time money was put into it or something like
yeah,
that.
so this looks a little pre that, but kind of around the same time frame. So this is pretty cool. I'd like to know what kind of legal standing this also has, like if this is like officially the thing. I'd also like to read it. This wasn't part of our package.
No, it was not.
Yeah.
I thought there was
Would
sorry, go ahead, Gary.
Well, I was just going to say it'd also be nice to have the current version of these chapters in the Vermont statutes and stuff like that, so that we know what's changed and if our duties might be altered since then. I would assume they would be.
Yeah, if there is not a current version, then we should edit and create a current version so we have a proper foundational document on who we are, what we're charged with doing.
That all makes sense. Yeah, I didn't put this in the packet. I figured there's a lot to look at for today. So I just thought I'd show it to you now that, note that it's been found in, I'll send it out, maybe we can look at it before next time.
Title 25. Is that what you said? Title 24.
24.
Municipal charters. Okay.
Okay, so a couple other quick updates. So May 15th is the date that Matt gave me in terms of if you wanted to make any edits to the current desired trails layer that's shown on the map that was featured at Green Up Day. That's the draft map for map, I think it's 15 parks and primitive trails that is going to be going into the town plan. So there is a little bit of time, but it's not much. There may even be a little more wiggle room than that, but that's the date he threw out for now.
That was May what?
May 15th. So basically 1 week from today. So we can take a look and, you know, if anything comes out of the conversation today, we can propose a change it. If not, you know, that'll be the map that gets published for this round.
Okay.
Ann O'Day has been hired and
Oh,
is
great.
out on the trails, maybe in this week, just getting started, collecting information and taking care of the doggy bag dispensers and helping to clear down brush and all of the great things that Ann has done in the past. Ann will be working maybe a little less than in years past, so we may be looking to bring another trail steward on at some point this summer and kind of dovetail maybe a transitionary period for making sure that we're well supported in that area in the future. I also spoke with Deb Muccio about the pollinator garden. And in terms of timing, there's a little bit of work that Deb is planning to do now.
I don't know if you intend to have your teams pop up on there, but
I did not. Oh, interesting. I think that popped up on the other my other computer. Thanks for doing that. Sure, it popped up.
Are we presenting? Are we? Because I think that's still being presented.
Yeah, I'm sharing this goal statement on this computer. I can stop that share. So I'm not looking at.
Yeah.
So Deb mentioned that there's some work that's happening now, just in terms of what Deb is doing out there, but in terms of how the Conservation Commission can support. Deb mentioned that early June would be a great time if people are interested to maybe have a weeding party out there. If people are interested to get a little bit of people power out there for an hour or two and do some weeding in the garden, and also potentially if people have resources or know-how or interest in helping to repair or update the fence around the fenced-in portion. The goal being that that's a very visible location. It's, you know, in many ways a demonstration garden. It'd be great to have something that is sound and also aesthetically, you know, of a nature that would showcase the garden to the best of its.
What is the fence now?
There's snow stakes,
Okay.
like wooden, like the ones that you put on the sidewalks. And like a chicken wire fence. I think it's the coated chicken wire. I don't remember now,
Like
but
green coated.
actually, no, I think it's a regular chicken wire, and it's regular chicken wire, and it's only like knee-high fencing. But the problem is the stakes are like bending in, you know, they're not strong and they're only just pounded in with a hammer.
Yeah.
So we probably need more sturdy fencing if we want it to last for years as opposed to months.
what is the purpose of the fencing?
It's to
Rabbits.
keep rabbits from eating all the perennials while they're starting out.
Right.
Yeah.
Is the fence buried 3 inches down?
It's
Prevent
buried
burrowing?
a few inches, yes.
Okay.
So we haven't had any issues yet with like
Yeah.
terrorizing animals inside the fence, but it definitely, I think it's mostly the posts and not the fencing itself that's trouble and.
Right. The problem is that with freeze thaw cycles, that chicken wire is always gonna like bend towards the ground.
It's always gonna try to,
Yeah,
fall in.
yeah, but you do need those metal stakes. Rather
Like
than-
metal T-posts in the corners at a minimum, even if the ones in between on the straights are not as strong,
Yeah,
so.
I've
it's a lot.
done that fencing in my yard. I know how to do it, but I mean,
I hear a volunteer.
yeah, if you have the materials, I could
Right.
probably go out there and bang it out.
I think it's pretty reasonable. I could find some funding for basic materials, if we have some volunteer power to install it. And maybe it's the kind of thing that, you know, just needs a little bit of yearly maintenance to keep it looking nice.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily have to be, an expensive or fancy fence, but just want to keep it, you know, at a presentation quality to, so people aren't wondering what the heck that garden is. And that was the other thing that Deb mentioned that I could help with is in terms of some signage. Right now, there's some paper laminated signage that is decaying. And so I think replacing that with a plastic corrugated sign, something with those green up day signs that's a little more durable.
Last a few years.
Yeah, will last a couple of years and probably be cost efficient.
I know that Colleen O'Brien's 7th and 8th grade classes at WCS have already been out once to begin weeding, so the students are also pitching in.
Is there anything blooming yet?
I haven't seen anything blooming yet, but the perennials all look like they're coming back strong this year. They were already, when the snow was melting, they were already green and starting to grow, so I think it was successful in terms of first winter.
All right, so two other updates, the ones that I have on the agenda here. The Allen Brook Bridge. There has been some progress here in terms of just procedure, nothing to report in terms of definitive word, but the engineers are working. They've been in communication with streams and stream alteration folks at the state and Army Corps of Engineers, and a site visit has been planned with Josh Ryan of Timber and Stone, who is the designer and builder who replaced the bridge back in, I believe it was 2021. So Josh is going to be on site, and right now the engineering proposal as it's taking place is to use, if it will be doable and permissible by stream alterations, to use a stronger post, essentially, as opposed to the helical piles that are out there right now, to use a stronger post in areas where erosion is likely to occur, so that even if that soil washes away, it's buried down deep enough and it's strong enough that it will be able to hold. So that inevitably will come with additional costs. And I've alerted both Matt and Eric Wells that will likely be the case. Was going to be the case anyways, just because of what's going on with materials and the economic situation right now. So I'm just going to keep at it weekly, trying to send out reminders to folks and try to get this moving as quickly as possible. And hopefully we'll have a quote soon enough that, you know, the goal being we can at least have a chance of affecting or repair this before the end of the summer, or at least know what our options are in terms of whether it's going to be affordable or a barrier that requires, you know, really
A full rethink.
Yeah.
Is, you mentioned helical pole,
Helical piles, I think. is
helical
what they're-
piles. What is the difference between that and say something that like is pounding down through the substrate? Like, how deep do those poles go right now?
I don't have the technical information, but
Yeah.
they go a few feet down, and I think the issue is that they went a few feet down from the pre-erosion level. So you know, when that topsoil was kind of washed away, when the stream formed a new channel, they were exposed to the level that was no longer stable and no longer supporting the bridge. And so I think the idea is, and in addition, when they get exposed, it's now a taller stretch of pole that is trying to support the same amount of bridge and the same amount of traffic on that bridge.
Yeah.
And so you would need a sturdier, wider diameter pole in order to make that happen. So
Right.
I'm not 100% sure, but I believe the solution right now is basically if we can get a sturdier pole that will be able to support that, even in the case of that erosion, it would go down deeper as well, so that in the case of erosion, it would sustain.
Okay.
And thus allowing for the dynamic environment down there.
How much of the existing bridge I mean, I know this is all be part of it, but like, how much of that existing bridge will need to be deconstructed in order to make room for pile driver and like the construction process? It just seems like they're gonna have to take down, I don't wanna use the word tear down, but take down a big portion of it in order to sort of accommodate that restructure.
That's unknown, and I think that is gonna be a major topic of discussion at the joint site visit, which is scheduled for next Friday. And the questions there are basically gonna be, can we get the appropriate equipment down there? Is that gonna be permissible to stream alterations and wetlands folks?
Right.
And then your question exactly, like, just what would be the logistics? I think the hope is that most of the wood itself, the boardwalk material is in decent shape, can be reused, and it's just replacement supports. Where the bridge has sagged, some of that wood may need to be, I would imagine would need to be replaced.
It's
But
been mangled for a year now,
yeah,
Mhm.
sitting like that.
I'm starting to get into the realm of speculation, so.
Yeah,
Yeah, fair enough.
is there an opportunity for commissioners to come on
Yeah,
the site visit?
yeah, that's a
if we're
great
available?
question. Thanks for asking it. I probably should have premeditated that and invited you. 9 a.m. Friday, 16th, I believe, May 16th, at the bridge site. Yeah, let me know if you're available, if you'd like to be there to take a look. The more the merrier. The site can accommodate plenty of people, same time.
Just not on the boardwalk.
Wear muck boots. Or actually, I've been down there in shoes that you don't mind getting muddy.
Mhm.
Well, it's not gonna work for me, but
Okay,
thanks for asking me. Hopefully others can participate.
all right, and I've got one more minute here, so I'm just gonna jump into the next topic. So Gary and Reed, unfortunately, I don't have a digital version of this, but I do have a printed out map here that shows a project in the process of permit approval. This is the Marcotte property done by Lake Fairfield. So I'll pass this around and you'll see that essentially where this permitting process is that there's a conversation right now between with state wetlands about how many lots are going to be allowed on this parcel. And that's largely determined by the location of wetlands and whether they'll be allowed to get a road across those wetlands, and which will determine the number of sites. But you'll notice that there's about 100 acres, which is directly contiguous to the Lake Iroquois uplands. And that portion of the property is designated for conveyance to the town for the price of purchasing those development rights. And so that to make sure that the goal is to make to try to advance the conversation about getting an appropriate price and agreement in place for what that transaction will be with the town, so that when everything's finished with wetlands, when the permit is ready to be approved, then we can move forward with the disbursement of ERF funds to potentially purchase that portion of land. And so conducting an appraisal would require some funds, a small amount of funds, and I've been told that that is an approved use of funds from the ERF. So it doesn't require a direct approval from the Conservation Commission, but I wanted to share this with you, make sure everybody knew that this is something that is going to be prioritized for this spring, early summer, to try to get an appraisal moving out there so that we can have all the information about what it would cost to complete that transaction and kind of complete that evaluation conversation with all of you.
What's the cost of the appraisal?
I don't have that number yet.
Is that gonna be a request to this commission for the expense, or is that a discretionary expense that the town can just go right?
I've been told that it's a discretionary expense that the town can just go ahead with.
Okay, so we're not gonna slow that process down by our approval.
Yeah, that's my understanding.
From the 2020 ERF prioritization, that's a high priority parcel with 2 desired paths mapped, so. good to see conversation about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll try to get that information as soon as possible. I think right now it's just that state of. We know what's going on with the permitting process. We know that they've got a little bit of a logjam with state wetlands. And they're waiting till kind of midsummer to move forward with site visits to figure that stuff out. And so it seems like the opportune moment to also get this appraisal process started. And it's my first time going through that, so I don't know exactly what that entails, whether we need to reach out to multiple appraisers or if we're just working with the appraisal folks in town. So once I get that number, I'll let you know.
The land between this parcel and the lake itself looks like it's protected. Is that town-owned land or is that?
That is
No.
land owned by the Lake Iroquois Recreation District, of which Williston is a member, so. I'm not entirely sure how that ownership works and what the structure of Lake Iroquois Recreation District is. But I believe it's not explicitly town-owned land. It's sort of de facto, but I think management decisions around that land go through the recreation district.
Yeah, I think Wilson just has representation on that, whatever committee or board that oversees that land.
Like John Marcotte has explained that there are a number of trails already back there. And the hope is, assuming that this wetlands trail, or really the intention is that those trails will eventually be open to the public. And so that's part of the conversation around where the roads are gonna go, because they want to make sure that there's a public right of way to access, but they also want to make sure that's not going directly through someone's backyard. So as they're figuring out where to lay out the various lots and how that's going to work, they're doing that with an eye towards access to this back area.
Yeah, we reviewed this a couple months ago, right?
Yes,
Okay, you've seen this.
yes, we did. We saw this.
But I think some of those building sites, some of those building envelopes have moved since we saw it. If my memory serves, I feel like there weren't three at the very back, but maybe
Yeah.
That's possible. The three at the back are the most aspirational, I guess is a word, and it is sounding likely that those three will not be permitted. Because that would
I was gonna
require.
say it's so far back in, and I know it's really wet,
Right.
so.
So the conversation right now is primarily around the middle two. Yeah. Which is the last 4 and 5, labeled last 4 and 5, exactly, how those will be reached, what their layout may be, and whether there are sort of alternate configurations of lots. That might work out instead. As you can see, there's significant wetlands.
Yeah.
Gary, I'm gonna text you a picture of this document
No, that's the good.
so that you can. I'll go ahead here.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate that.
That looks like a really complex hydrology right there that
Yeah,
they're gonna be trying to build.
Yeah.
even lot 3 looks a little.
Right. It's complex, and you can see the road that is included there. That is a logging road,
Yeah,
meant to be a permanent logging road that was constructed, according to John Marcotte, I think about 10 years ago. This may have been explained at
it was.
this hearing. And in wetlands or initial review, they essentially said this road should have never been constructed.
I read they say that a lot about logging roads.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think at the time that the information that Marcotte's had was this, there was no indication that it shouldn't have been constructed at the time. They thought they were doing everything, right, according to information they had. And now they're receiving this different information. So there's some frustration there. But I think all parties are trying to work with each other, and it's really just going to depend on where state wetlands lands in terms of what they'll permit.
Okay. Great, and I would just add that, getting some of the, I can't remember if we had the minutes reflect some of those updates. But that's great, and clearly you've been very busy, and I really appreciate those updates. It would be great to see some of the sort of final and next steps, like the things that you both found, and then the things that you're planning to do reflected in minutes, so that, you know, because I wasn't taking notes on all of those things, but those are great.
Okay.
Heads up for us.
Gary, it's in your email. I didn't have your cell number, so it's in your email.
Okay.
All right, so
Thank you.
it's 7:38. We went 8 minutes over. Let's jump. Oh, and the
All
update.
good. All
Update
good.
over.
Go ahead, Laura.
Okay, thanks. Actually, Reed, you were the one that was first at the table at Green Up Day and talking to people. Was there anything? Okay,
It was lovely sharing the table with Lisa and Stormwater folks.
It
And
was.
their materials and our materials melded together really nicely, because we, at the fringe of our stuff was like pollinator watershed stuff, and the core of her stuff was watershed and all the blue program stuff anyway. But
yeah, even though it was raining, there were a lot of people
Oh, yeah.
there.
Good.
One thing people were asking about was, wow, I didn't know there was a park right here south of the interstate. I don't think that should be a park. That should be town-owned land. This green,
Town forest, county.
it should have been yellow hash, just.
it should have been
it's just a
yellow
note
hash.
For mapping, for the layers,
Yeah, just for when it's corrected for the comprehensive plan.
Thank you for that.
That's, is that the Montana farm?
there are trails there
Net
that
property.
people are mountain biking on.
I know,
We had a conversation a year or so ago about this. There are trails and people are using them, including mountain biking. It is not sanctioned activity.
That's right, I remember.
right. So I talked to all those people.
Every single one.
They were all there.
Mhm. I love going there.
And they sent me all the information because they've been working on this still,
The trips.
not the trails.
Oh, okay.
They're talking to all the landowners around because they want to have trails. And I sent all that information to you
That's what, okay.
and
okay.
Dave. So that's what that was
That's what
about.
that was about. Okay, thank you.
So I said, I'll send all this information on, and it does, I mean, they do have, there is a way to get right back in there. So that is just one.
So this is the south of 89 off of
Right.
Hurricane Lane.
Right, so Hurricane Lane ends at a couple businesses, and they talked to those businesses. This is all in the materials I sent to Dave and Dave. And it looks like the person here is open to them coming right over to this parcel. So if Fellowship of the Wheel got involved and we didn't have to deal with it, that might be a nice,
Right.
but we'd have to look at it
Yeah.
and do Act two
Well,
fifty.
you gotta make sure that it's suitable for mountain biking activity
Right.
on it. And yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that also seems like we'd also want to allow the general public to hike through there too, and if
Mhm.
possible, make connections and such.
It is part of a desired connection on this map. Is this one attached to the thing?
I have one of
Yes,
those.
yes.
Yeah, I have this one, but yeah.
I'll share this, we're gonna get to this for the ERF conversation, but I will share the
So we're talking about that yellow hashed one.
this is a printout that we have on site, Gary.
Yellow hashed one there is light green. That's the one.
If you can see
Right
the
there.
map.
Oh, yeah, that's
We're
correct on
talking
this
about
map.
this property right here.
It's correctly
Oh, yeah.
hashed.
And the one just to the right of that, by the way, they had talked to the people that own that who live in Texas, and they said, we don't want to have any easements on our land. Don't call us again.
Ooh.
Oh, wow.
Which one? Which parcel?
This one here.
Yeah, that one right
Oh,
there.
that's too bad, because that's one of the last ones remaining to make that connection.
Who knows?
Dave, can
Yeah.
you maximize the Zoom window up on the screen?
The Conservation Commission instead of a
Oh,
random
that.
person, maybe it would be
Right.
different. Anyway, I just wanted to point that out.
Oh, yeah, that's better too.
Okay,
Yeah, anything else to, what,
Yeah.
I see a lot of writing up here.
yeah. So this has to do with your neighborhood.
Uh-huh.
There was a gentleman and his daughter who said, for this public land, which is right by Brendan Woods.
Yep.
Yeah, that's triangle there.
Yeah, that one. He said, I used to go in here a lot. It's really beautiful in there. And I can't get there anymore because there's a no trespassing sign.
Mhm.
What is that? No trespassing sign?
I can give you the story about that. It is,
Starts with morning runs.
yeah, there's a guy who built a house right here.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a developer, and so he owned this whole parcel down to Mountain View Road
Mm-hmm.
and put his house right here off of Hannon Drive. And there used to be an access, like a little connector trail right there. And so this guy's property abuts that, and he's put up a no trespassing sign in the little spot of private land to prevent people from walking into it. So now, in order to get to it, you have to take this, there's actually a service road, like right here. And so you have to walk the service road and then come in that way.
Okay, so I wonder if we should somehow, can we put the service road as part of our trail somehow?
I don't see why not. I mean, it's used by the Newski, I'm sorry, the Champlain Water District. It's used by the town. It's basically, there's a pump at the bottom of that road, next to the river for pumping.
Yeah, because that guy was really sad. I don't know if he knows about the service road, but he also asked if there was any way it could be connected to Finney Crossing, because he said it would be great if we could just walk over to Finney Crossing.
Yeah, so like
But
that
there
would
is
be,
a brook.
yeah, this is Allen Brook, and you would need to build a bridge over Allen Brook. And right now, anything that would temporarily be built in like midsummer gets washed away
Right,
at any spring. This actually is what my trail run is that I follow Allen Brook over to the pathway. Over
It is a bridge, right? Over by 2A. It's a
yeah,
bridge,
and then
right?
I take the 2A, the bridge over 2A,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
which is kind of like follows this way. This is Beaudry?
Gary, apologies if this conversation may be.
Yeah, sorry,
hard
Gary.
to follow.
I'm imagining it in my head.
This road doesn't
About
actually connect, so I don't know why Beaudry is shown as connecting. I guess that's probably because that's in the development stages right now, but Beaudry doesn't connect. But that is actually, so basically what I'm talking about here is that there is a trail that follows Allen Brook. And then this multi-use path is not on the map, and it should be. And it basically comes in this way. And then right now it dead ends at Beaudry and doesn't continue.
Oh, yeah. I guess the reason it's not on there is because this is a primitive trail map. Yeah.
Too many layers.
Yeah.
And I think that's an interesting point because
Right.
pedestrians don't care about the layer on your map.
Right.
And they will immediately transition from a multi-use to a primitive trail in order to make connections.
Right, exactly. So both should be on.
Yeah,
Okay.
Both should
I
be
have
on.
thought about that before, but I don't know if that, I don't know how others feel about that in terms of this particular map, adding that layer in, but I can certainly ask.
Well,
Oh,
or
for
having a
this
separate
one.
map that
Just a
has,
separate
that
map,
doesn't
yeah.
have the conservation areas, but does have all the primitive trails and all of the multi-use paths.
Right, this is how you walk around.
Like a pedestrian map,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Because you don't care if there's a pedestrian, what type of trail.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, then there were a bunch of
Oh,
people,
boy.
multiple people that came over and said, why can't we use this old Fay Road up here? Because they all live like up here. And they said, here is this easement, right?
now we're talking about this,
Okay, yeah.
this road right here.
Yeah, the old Fay Lane, they go, why can't we use that as a trail to get to
It goes
Catamount?
past the Whitcomb, it goes
Whitcomb
past
Farm.
Whitcomb Farm, and then it does currently dead end at a private parcel that is very clearly like
Marked,
marked as like, and like a dump
Not
area.
anchored.
Yeah.
I see, but I'm wondering also at the end of was this Old Stage Road, they said it would be great to be able to put a trail through. That's where the old where there's still a tree farm there, right?
Yes, so actually, there is a connection.
Guys,
So this is.
I have to go. I'm sorry, but I gotta take off. Have a great
Well,
meeting.
thanks, Gary.
Yeah, yeah. Bye.
Gary.
So,
Actually, leave it 8:50, not 7.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, 8:50.
so this is a fire road that connects Old Stage to Brennan Forest, or not Brennan
Like
Forest,
right here?
Williston Woods.
Wilson Woods, yeah.
It follows this green right here. So this is a fully maintained fire road. It's grass. And it's used by no one other than me and
Mhm.
hikers from Williston Woods.
Yeah, on Google Maps, it looks like a full road.
It is. It's a full maintained,
Oh,
like
it's-
graded road because the fire department built it because there's so many homes back here
Right.
that they need a secondary egress.
Well,
Right.
can that be a primitive trail? Why couldn't that be listed as a primitive trail?
I mean, I
You just need
use
signage, right? You need sign that says like follow for this length and then exit this direction.
Yeah, obviously it's being used right now.
Yeah, I even saw
Yeah.
some people doing like vine maintenance,
Oh, wow.
bittersweet, whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, bittersweet. They were doing vine maintenance on it.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So anyway, I don't know if we could put like would like to right here. Because that is a road. But anyway, people say they feel like they're gonna die.
Yeah, that
when
road.
they get
horrible.
out.
It's the worst.
I know, I've been on that road, with my road like many times, but
It's probably fine when the people were in horse and buggy, but not so much anymore.
On North Wilson Road.
Yeah.
yeah, and when this bridge was closed, it was nice, but. So anyway, this area, it would be nice to get some folks to be able to get to
So
Catamount.
people wanted to get into Catamount from the
Yeah.
north.
Yeah,
I've never explored this because it's a dead end, so I don't know what's
it's a dead
there.
end and it's posted here because the horse farm's here, right? So there's no
Okay.
way you would be able to get past that.
Mhm.
Yeah. So this is just another.
I also know from the trails at Catamount here that this is a very significant gully and
Oh,
wetland
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
wetland complex. So trying to get from the north into those trails, I've thought
West
about that
seems
as
more feasible than
Yeah.
north there.
This also
Yeah.
is one of the few kind of untrailed, relatively unvisited areas in that area, and I think just from a wildlife perspective,
Right,
Getting out of that corner is probably good.
it's
Yeah.
probably a less good place to put trails versus, these two, which
Well,
are,
Then the Velco transmission line.
Oh, yeah.
There, I mean,
that's what this is.
that's what that is.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Velco transition line goes that way and that would be way easier to.
There's already, yeah, that's basically my extended backyard and there is a trail back through there.
Oh, yeah, and people mentioned that too,
She's
that
not
this is a
mentioning.
great.
So
Great.
it's not perfect for the people who wanna come in from way up, but if they could go down a
Yeah.
road far enough to connect to it, North Wilson Road's a problem, but.
It would be nice to go here. Like come up here and go.
That would be amazing to avoid the North Williston Road,
Right.
like if that was a designated
Mhm.
pathway.
This is Redmond, or no, this is Redmond.
Yeah,
That's red.
Okay, this is the certain highway right away or whatever.
yeah, and so this is Fay Road. I've never been back there, so I don't know.
Um,
You know where Wickham Farm is? If you
Yeah,
turn just
I know
before,
Wickham.
yeah, so if you just go down past Wickham Farm, just keep going. It just
Oh,
keeps-
that's
It
it.
just keeps going and keeps going,
Yeah.
yeah.
Until you get
Until
dirty
you
looks
get-
from
until
the
you get
people
to-
who don't want you there.
Yeah, I mean, not that you necessarily like. Would feel welcome to go down there, but like it is a road
Okay,
and then eventually you get.
It's a
to
road that
Redmond
they
Road.
treat like a private road.
yeah,
is sort of
Wickham,
my-
they're nice people.
Oh, yeah, Wickham's
Very
great.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
that far, no
Oriented.
problem, it's just.
But
Yeah.
it is part of Fay Road private and blocked off, or?
Or is it still a town road?
I think it's still a town road,
So
but I
if
think
it's
it
a
gets
town
more
road.
like boony, right? Like the people back in there are like this is like our area,
Yeah.
like a through road.
Looking at it on Google.
Yes, not a private
Right.
road.
Like this right
Stuff
here.
back there at the end.
Yeah.
Wow, look at that.
And then I was trying to see where you get turned, make
We
this
donated a
left turn.
mattress to.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So this is where people don't want you.
Yeah,
Right,
Yeah.
Interesting.
and that,
It definitely feels like you're going onto somebody's
what's left of that?
farm or something.
There's the river right there.
Yeah,
Um,
gorgeous. Look at that.
this is the
That's a
CBSD.
Yeah.
trail.
So, so people want to be able to go in
So-
like somewhere over here, is that the idea?
Yeah, I think the idea would be to make some kind of connection.
How they get
You know, if you're looking at it from,
road to get over to.
this is the
That's
street.
interesting.
So if you could actually get from here to this, I don't know, sand farm, I don't know what that
Right.
is,
Well,
but that would be more feasible to get down into Fayette.
right, interesting, okay, I see, I see.
Well, is there anything else then we want to put on this by May 15th? With all that information?
I mean, we've technically, I think, already got this because of the desired connection points, don't we?
You got the
I mean,
We have this.
Yeah.
but those are broad placeholders, they're not
Well,
actually.
and Fay Lane is already mapped on there all the way over.
Right, that's true.
So on this map that I put together, this is just a sort of rough draft map trying to match the request from last time to superimpose the two prioritizations. The pink ones is an older desired trails layer.
Yeah.
Sort of light pink ones, and the bright, dark purple and red, that's the pared back collection
I
design.
agree with this.
That were
Yeah.
deemed to be more feasible and more impactful.
I mean, I have to
Right.
say, I wanna see this pink one back in. This.
I think that is in.
That is it.
Yeah, that's
It
the
is in
dark
on there?
pink one.
Yeah, the dark
Yeah.
purple
The-
is in.
Yeah, that's dark. See, there's very
It's,
light pink
light-
that's right
light
beside it.
pink, yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. But it kind of sounds like,
They're talking.
yeah,
about
it
this
kind
right
of sounds
there.
like that's what's being talked
Right
about, right?
here.
Yeah, that's one of the ones that's being talked about.
Yeah.
So is there interest in putting that one back in?
Yeah, not this one, because we talked about
Right.
the habitat and
Yeah,
wildlife impacts of going to that corner. I sort of think I would be in favor of adding back in the Old Stage Road extension, essentially that.
Okay, so
right.
like right here.
Yeah, not necessarily a specific location, but like a general.
Yeah, it's a
connection, Connection,
desired connection.
Yeah.
Okay,
because it really would help folks who want to walk up that direction, but don't want to come up North Wilson Road. It is not safe to walk up North Wilson
Right.
Road.
Right,
and it would make the detour potentially less onerous.
right. If you want to get the catamount.
If you were trying to avoid North Williston Road.
And would that avoid the that farm with all the junk around it?
Storage
It
area.
would.
Oh,
Depends
that
on
would be great.
How far east you went with.
Yeah.
But it could potentially. Okay.
Yeah.
It
Yeah, I
is-
mean, I think that's a pretty clear, that should be a pretty clear recommendation that would be easy enough to put back in.
Yeah,
Um,
okay, that's great.
I think these two are kind of interesting proposals because they're both, they strike me as these are both places that are potentially walkable or bikeable from the
Right.
center, which
Mhm.
was one of the conversations around ERF prioritization and trail prioritization in general is, most of the preserved land and trails are out in the, rural areas.
Mhm.
Whereas we know that there's a lot of population density in northwest Williston, so. They seem like conceptually good places for trail connections. That one
also-
is in, there is a somewhat contiguous habitat block here, but I think. Its proximity to 89, its proximity to downtown
Right.
center, probably a good place. Or at least certainly in consideration if other factors. Are suggesting trails could work there.
Mhm.
Yeah, do we have the Hurricane Lane to? I don't think we have Hurricane.
That is undesired trails.
Yeah, it's. this-
No, I'm talking about Hurricane Lane up to Five Tree Hill.
Oh,
So I
we
want,
never did that.
I want a Hurricane Lane to Five Tree Hill lookout, trail connection on the map. Because, that's just one of those things that's in my head, is like.
can you draw what that would
Yeah.
Yeah,
look like?
here's a pen.
Yeah, so something like. Would be something It could be because of these trail easements we have today. It could be something that comes up like this.
There's a little road there,
And
right?
we have a little, let's see, this is Suckerbrook. So, because Boomhauer also owns this stuff in here.
Right.
So something like this that connects up. And I don't know if it comes here or if it goes there.
Okay,
Um, so I don't know anything about those properties in between, but I know we had a few folks
Right,
along Old Creamery here who are interested on this side, and we already have trail easements on the other side that go almost as far down, and I don't know if it comes here. Or I think more likely because of the park and ride being here,
mhm.
I want it to be pretty accessible, something like
right.
that.
That's a great idea. There was a woman right here who said, can you please buy my property or how can I donate it? It's so beautiful back there. Was it Packard?
The Packard family, yeah,
Yeah.
there's a daughter of the
Yeah,
family contacted us a year ago. It's one of the ones I forwarded to you.
Yeah.
You had that family, and she said she thought there might be other people. That she actually wrote us and we talked to her on a meeting and we said, look, you have a small parcel, it's not a high priority parcel, so we can't just go out and work with you probably on yours, but if you and some neighbors were willing to do something together, then, if you can group together like a low, two mediums and a high or something, and then you're like, okay, now it might be worth it. Hi, welcome. You here for Conservation Commission?
I am.
Come on in.
Right.
Let me phone here, not till, got a few minutes to go, but,
Yeah, we're just
Yeah, good.
working through
We're
some,
talking about trails, so
okay, if I,
happy to,
Absolutely.
please
please.
feel free.
I remember, okay. Yeah, how many minutes do we still have for?
So we are officially in the ERF prioritization,
Okay,
part of the agenda, but it kind of blends in from
Yeah.
what your update was from the Green Up Day and what people were talking to you about.
okay, do we need a motion if we're gonna add a couple new connectors or?
That might be
This might
useful.
be good.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'm kind of I'm taking some notes. So, right now we've got a connection through the Williston Woods Fire Road and then we talked about the Hurricane Lane connection to, Suckerbrook.
And. We already have that one.
And maybe the, Old Stage Road. There's kind of two, and they're in pink on there, the light pink, there's
Mhm.
the.
Yeah, that's the one that Dave just mentioned.
Yeah,
right?
that's, yeah. That's the
Okay,
connection through. the-
and can we put the road as a trail connection between Brennan Woods and this?
Yes, that's about what I mean.
Okay, one more thing. Really quickly, I remember when Jens was here, he said you should put your culverts that you are interested in the maps, and this,
We like wildlife crossing culverts?
no, like,
And human.
And
pedestrian
human.
Permitted trail crossing
And-
culverts.
this purple one from Mud Pond that goes to the interstate.
Mhm.
What pond underneath?
There's, the old Vast Trail used to go right under the interstate there.
Hmm.
So, well, it looks like it almost goes right through there already. No, on here it does, maybe. So I wonder if we should just put a little connector there. In
Is that
case,
connection under Interstate 89?
yeah. That's just a suggestion because since older snowmobiles used to be able to go through
Yeah,
there, I would
that's
think
gonna
people
be
could
close, yeah.
walk through there.
A conceptual connection there, yeah.
The this old South Road that was clearly cut off during the interstate construction was, these roads were at one point contiguous.
Yeah.
So I'm not quite sure where I was going with that, but like this is nothing. Like there's nothing that follows this river right now. But if you were gonna ever build an actual like underpass for either pedestrians or cyclists or snowmobiles in that part of the ARZD, then I think that's where you would probably do it.
Yeah, the thing is, they often replace these culverts and I don't think they'd make a new culvert or underpass.
So
So
might
since-
upgrade the existing one.
if
to a
they need
larger
to
size.
upgrade
I
it,
see.
they do make it bigger for wildlife. And there's also one right here at the end of Bradley Lane that I've used many times.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you just have to bend over to get through it. So I don't know if we can put those in here. In case they ever replace them, that would be nice for people to walk through.
So yeah, conceptual connections under 89 at the location of existing.
Culverts.
Culverts.
What was the second one, Bradley Lane?
That's the one where the old Bradley Lane goes down right to the interstate and you can actually go right under there to,
This one right here, right?
Yeah.
That one, yeah.
At the tip of this red arrow.
Yeah,
okay. I'm sorry to take up so much time with that, but I
No,
thought if
it's
we're gonna
fine. I
get
mean,
this
this-
map in.
It was
Yeah.
fruitful conversations, yeah.
what the conversation is all about.
Okay, I'll make a motion to update the map to include the two culverts. Under 89, the trail. That goes from Hurricane Lane to 5 Tree Hill. To make the service road from Brennan Woods to town-owned land. A trail on the map. And to put in a proposed trail from Williston Woods. To the tip of Old Stage Road. Did I remember all the?
I think so. I've got the Williston Woods, Fire Road. Hurricane Lane to Sucker Brook and,
Do we need to say to go down to Fay Lane from Old Stage? Or just the Wilson Woods? I don't know. There's kind of two, like.
oh, right.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of like a forked connection there.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
To Phelan.
Okay,
And then the,
that,
trail connection from Brennan Woods to multi-use path
yeah. And,
on 2A.
yeah.
And then the two culverts,
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah, so I was thinking that motion, or.
all right.
okay,
Okay.
great, all approved or any conversation about the, or are there any discussions about the motion? Okay, all in favor of approving the motion?
Aye.
As discussed.
I,
Aye.
All right, I'll be happy to convey those recommendations to the map makers and
Thank you.
Okay,
yeah, I'll let you know if there's any. If there are any counter suggestions on any of those, but I imagine that it's as simple as just putting a line on the map.
Okay.
You get the correction to make this one town owned.
Yes, I have that as well.
and it is correct on
It is,
this
yeah.
layer somehow.
Ah.
They're different.
I need to ask you how you go underneath Bradley. I mean, that doesn't even look like a connection point. So.
Right, so-
I'll show you.
We got, I'd say 8:15 maybe is a good time just to pause and welcome newcomers and switch over
Sure.
to the conversation starting at 8:20. So that gives us kind of 10 minutes
Mhm.
to talk a little bit more about prioritization. Now, one small thing that I did was I took just the brainstorming, a little bit of brainstorming from last time. Let's see if this is okay. Let me zoom in here.
Are you able to maximize that window so it takes a
Black window.
monitor? The full TV?
Yes.
You can touch it, the maximize with your brain. There you go.
Here we go. Sorry about that.
Yeah, very legible.
So these were so we were talking about, we have these, tools that help us prioritize, like these maps. That show parcels that might have more conservation value than other parcels. Where a conservation easement or potentially fee acquisition of land could really benefit the conservation landscape as a town. But that's just one decision-making tool, and we talked about establishing some qualitative goals or guiding goals that might also help decision-making in this process. And those were just a couple of things that got mentioned last time. So connecting open space to permanent conservation areas, prioritizing fewer but higher quality connections. And we've had kind of a discussion about trails and connections just now, focusing out from existing conserved parcels. So if there are ways to grow areas that are already conserved, and using the significant wildlife habitat area in an updated prioritization map as a potentially another tool. So I just wanted to put that out there in case anyone wanted to revisit any of these or add anything to that list. Any other sort of comments or thoughts anyone has about prioritization and the different tools that we have kind of available to us? Take a few minutes.
Yeah, read, and then
Um,
I'll make a comment.
So one of the things that I'm interested in is which, if any of these are already somehow captured in the prioritization, because I don't want to double count something like, oh, we're already taking into account on the color gradient on the prioritization map, and then we're also thinking about it separately as basically like double counting that aspect. So SWHA, in my view, definitely needs to be updated on the prioritization map at number 4, because if we look at SWHA separately right now, we're double counting certain things like forest cover and stuff that's already in the
What do you mean
prioritization
double
map.
counting?
Meaning like we're in the, if it's darker green on here, one of the factors that made it darker green potentially it are the same things that are mapped on SWHA. So if you go like, let's look at this, but then let's adjust for SWHA, you might be counting the same factors, taking them into account more than once.
Wouldn't that just reiterate that like, oh, we got it right? Is that a concern?
I don't know.
Except that there are other factors that aren't at SWHA, so you might be
Yeah.
skewing, so you might, it may not be a bad thing, maybe we want to weight them heavier, but there's potential that we're adding in weighting to our decision making for a certain factor more than once. I can't get it to silence. So that's one that I was thinking about, and so I was looking at the others and thinking, are they already somehow captured in the prioritization schema? And I think proximity to existing conserved parcels is, I'm trying to remember, but I think it is, adjacent to conserved or excluded land is already one of the things that gets points on a prioritization. So that one kind of applies to. And then the top one, connections to permanently conserved areas by proximity, it may be sort of incorporated. So it's just generally a comment that I think these are good things to look through, and we should make sure that we don't double count certain factors and not, and therefore deprioritize other factors that aren't on the list here.
Yeah.
I think I agree with Reed. I think what you have on the screen is a good starting point. Two questions, or one question and one point, I guess, is the question is, does the higher quality connections, would that be connections to the higher populated areas that are not currently served by protected lands, parks, or whatever? The second is, I think actually speaking to Reed's point, it might be helpful, assuming this is going to be on our several of our upcoming agendas, to just take a dive into, doesn't have to be a deep dive, but a dive into this significant wildlife habitat assessment, and just refresh your memories on what the elements were that we looked at, that we included in that, so we can make sure we're all on the same page regarding what the criteria were.
Yeah, great question. So in terms of higher quality rate, that's pretty big. If in the printout map that I made here, this draft, that project was basically saying, what are some qualities we can look at that would help us reduce the number of potential dire trails that we're kind of thinking about? And the qualities they came up with were basically feasibility. How likely would it be able to put a path here? Think affordability, impact on wildlife, sort of impact on, and then the last one was proximity to, areas that don't already have trails. So trying to bring an equity approach to it. So this is kind of shorthand for that. Yeah, I hear you. What I would say is, just in terms of why I think it's helpful to list down these goals is, just having this prioritization map is a very useful tool. But if you, the Conservation Commission, are talking about coming up with some outreach strategies to try to accomplish some conservation, this map becomes less helpful because there are 50 parcels that are in dark green. And so where do you start? And so that's why I think it's helpful to just establish a few guiding goals or questions that might help you start thinking about, okay, if we want to actually take some action, some proactive action, sure, we could call, all 50 people who happen to own a high priority parcel and see if they might be interested in conservation one day. Or you could take a more strategic approach to try to achieve a goal that happens to be top of mind for various reasons. So that's why I thought it was helpful to maybe put some of these thoughts down a list. And they don't have to necessarily, change the decision-making landscape, but they might help you decide if you want to, prioritize an outreach strategy over another.
Yep. Thanks, that's helpful. There is something that I was thinking needed to be added, which is improving access for either existing or planned areas. I'm thinking specifically of whatever that mountain is down there, that Brownell Mountain that doesn't have any access points. And I'm also thinking about Jacob Krantz, just because it's still not open yet. I'm also thinking about access points from things like multi-use pathways or primitive trails, and how pedestrians might be able to access these points. And so to that, I think that point in particular is very close to the focus out from existing conserved parcels but specifically, as I think of it, it's not just because those conserved parcels may or may not already have access points, because in some cases they don't. And so using the ERF to create access points for larger conserved parcels, I think should be on the table.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think, just from what I've heard in these first couple of meetings I've been involved with, it sounds like, maybe a good place to start in terms of building some outreach strategy would be really focusing on these connections and trails. It's a topic that's come up over and over again. And I think the Conservation Commission has some great perspective and a lot of information related to these trails, as these discussions have revealed. And so just collecting these goals together, that's clearly emerging for me as a lot of these strategies are adding up to, we can approach using ERF money or prioritizing ERF money from this lens of connections and access. And that might be a good place to start. Yeah.
One more popped into my head, and that is looking on the far side of our town borders. So like what's Richmond doing along our eastern border? If they are working to conserve some areas, making sure that is somehow taken into account, whether it's on the prioritization gradient or whether it's a separate layer that we just compare to when we're trying to come up with strategies. Because that's missing today. It's hard because it's manual outreach to those groups to say, hey, what's your prioritization map look like? And most towns don't have one. But if they at least have some projects or some existing conserved land that we can bring into our conversation.
And it's something that I think it's a conversation that could have with that group. I can never remember the name of it. South Chittenden. I don't know what it is, but
Yeah, I know who you mean.
Yeah,
there's this group of like five towns or so that are like the southern part of Chittenden County. Is Charlotte, St. George, Heinsberg, us, Shelburne, maybe.
Yeah.
That meet at some frequency.
that would cover like our south and west.
Once a quarter or something, yeah, and they talk about conservation issues.
Watershed, shared watersheds.
Yeah.
That's the name of that.
All right, well, it's 8:17, so I think we need to transition over to our next agenda topic. I think that was a good discussion though, good list. I think the plan is to keep this going as we develop, as we develop more, but, thanks, everyone. Let's move over to the Fournier project. I'm pronouncing that right? Is there anyone else, we're expecting, for participation?
I'm not sure if my engineer's showing up on Zoom or.
I don't have anyone yet.
I'm not seeing him yet.
George McCain, yeah.
Yeah, but I'll keep an eye out.
Okay.
So I think we usually would start this with a briefing from staff on the memo. And then concluding with the specific both recommendations and then what staff is asking the Conservation Commission to decide on. In very, very clear terms so that we can focus our discussion in the limited time that we have, because obviously you all have spent a lot of time on this project and we only have about half an hour.
Yeah, so I'll kick it off and then I'll turn it on over to David. So this is the Fournier project on Butternut Road. It went through pre-application review in 2023. The lot layout at pre-application was a little bit different, whereby the existing home and the existing garage are going to be split into two separate house lots. Now the house and garage are staying on the first lot, and the two new houses are being proposed just to the behind the existing home. So pre-application review was in October 2023. And now we're at discretionary permit where still 3 dwellings are being proposed. The fourth lot is the open space lot. For today, we have a couple recommendations at the very end of the report for you guys to take a look at. We added one since going through the review. And David will get into a little bit more detail on this. Number one is boilerplate. Their narrative mentions that a wetlands delineation was conducted and no wetlands were found. We would just like to have a copy of that report for the file. Final plans include a restoration and revegetation plan for the existing driveway. So because of the grade and some of our driveway requirements, they're reorienting the driveway. That existing area would need a revegetation plan. Confirming the plat to make sure that open space acreage is 75% at minimum. And then the new one we added is about the butternut tree species. The way our bylaw is written, if that species is found by either someone at Fish and Wildlife, or in this instance, a site identification by the habitat disturbance assessment biologist, if that species is found, that there be a letter of comment from Fish and Wildlife. The way we have this recommendation worded is based on our conversations, both with David's conversations with the biologist and someone at the state. They're probably going to have no comment, and in which case we would just say let's forward it onto the DRB. If they come back with something more substantive for you guys to review, then we can bring that back to you before it goes to the DRB. Scrolling back up to the pre-application recommendations, most of them have been met or are being met by the proposed conditions. Some things are for the DRB to review. For example, like the driveway standards, the density. Scrolling down a little bit, we get into a little bit more detail on the conservation commission. So that habitat disturbance assessment was done. It was following the process where the town contracts with the biologist. And then a lot of things were adjusted, making sure that the open space contained those habitat areas, building envelopes are 1/2 acre, etc. I'll pause there for any questions, and then we can turn it over to David, who could go in more detail about some of the unique species.
And I'll just take that pause to welcome Armand Fournier, and now George McCain is also with us.
Okay, great.
So welcome both. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
The only one note as I was reading this, which is I think the lettering on the right-hand side here doesn't match as you go down. Eventually, it falls out of sync
Yes.
with the lettering on the left. So just if anybody's getting confused,
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out.
Here,
yeah.
I noticed that last night. I think this D and E was duplicated,
Mhm.
And so that's the point where it stops
Okay.
matching up, so.
Yeah.
Apologies for that mistake, we'll correct that for the DRB report.
Any other questions?
In the two sections above that, number 4, the applicant should meet with Conservation Commission to discuss the results of the habitat disturbance assessment. And then in the staff notes, this did not take place, and you said this and I just missed it, but that means the habitat disturbance assessment did not take place, or the meeting with the Conservation Commission did not take
The
place?
meeting with the Conservation Commission didn't take place, and I think this is just human error between the various conservation planners over the past couple of months. I think had that review taken place, we probably could have expedited this Fish and Wildlife letter. But
Yeah.
life
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah,
Yeah, 2 changeovers. of
yeah,
staff.
unfortunately, there's been a little bit of turnover and there was a vacancy at my position. For several months, so it contributed to a slight delay in
And then-
processing that.
The extra or additional recommendation regarding the butternut, is that because, I'm sorry, is that because the butternut is, I know we on a site visit that we did for a project up the road a few years ago, there was shagbark hickory and I think butternut there. Is that so you're putting that in there because butternut is in the area?
Yeah, I can talk about that specifically. It's kind of an interesting borderline situation. So,
Yeah, go ahead and
Yeah.
talk about your.
yeah, so, I'll sort of talk us through some of the conservation components here. So, in terms of significant wildlife habitat, both core habitat and wildlife travel corridor maps on the parcel. And you can see that here. And so the Levi Kesey of TCE was the ecologist who went out there on June 21st and concurred with Williston's wildlife travel corridor and core habitat mapping. I found evidence of deer bedding sites and wildlife use out there. And also agreed that the site plan does a good job of mitigating impacts in terms of the clustering of homes down by the road and by the current clearing. And using a 4-point scale, it's negligible, minor, I believe then major and significant, perhaps the adverse impact threshold. This is boilerplate language, suggested that development would have a minor impact. The ecologist made a couple of non-binding recommendations that could potentially help mitigate things like recommending that contractor equipment is clean to avoid introducing invasive species, avoiding pesticide use on lawns, using caution, with fertilizing at the right times and conditions to avoid excessive runoff, considering nest boxes. So things like that non-binding, but helpful for wildlife. The next component, and this is where the butternut comes in and where there's, it does get a little bit confusing, is uncommon, rare, threatened, endangered species and communities. And so that was a major focus of the habitat disturbance assessment. You can see these polygons appear on the right. These long sort of vertical polygons are mapped areas of dry oak, hickory, hawthorn forest, which has been known in this region known as Grandma Ridge for a couple of decades. And so Levi Kesey went out and remapped that and found that there is a significant sort of finger of that community that stretches down into the parcel. However, it does not, the lots and building envelopes have been adjusted to avoid the mapped occurrence. And so the current plan does a good job of mitigating any concern in that habitat is contained in the proposed open space parcel. Now, this dot represents a known occurrence of an uncommon species, and that was looked for the habitat disturbance assessment and not found. However, what was reported was that butternut was found growing throughout the forested portion of the study site. And butternut's kind of a curious species. It is listed on the state uncommon species list as an S3 question mark, which is just about the the very edge of putting something on that list. And the reason is butternut used to be a very common species throughout the entire Northeast region. It's on a steep decline for a canker disease that's been affecting most of them. And so what Fish and Wildlife does is they map healthy occurrences of butternut that are believed to be native, because butternut was also planted by settlers as a food value tree. And so it really is kind of the borderline of where you start considering uncommon, but it is on the list. And I did reach out to Levi Kesey for clarification, reported that, they are healthy trees and they were found primarily towards the edge of the habitat blocks as opposed to the middle. So there is reasonable probability that we might find some of those trees in the area proposed. And so the letter of the bylaw is to reach out to Vermont Fish and Wildlife for comment. I managed to make contact with Grace Flynn, who's the state botanist. When I noticed this, it was the biologist had made a recommendation that, because we're on Butternut Road, and historically butternut had been abundant in the area, that perhaps it not be considered uncommon species for this particular site. But just given the letter of the bylaw and the listing of that species, we did think that the appropriate measure was to contact Fish and Wildlife. So verbally, Grace said that from what I described in the site plans, there really wasn't much of a concern. The goal would be to not cut down all of the butternuts. And the limited amount of clearing and the clustering already does a pretty good job of mitigating. So we just asked Grace to take a look at the plans and follow up with a written recommendation as our bylaw requests. And so that could be no comment. It's possible it could be, send a ecologist out there for an hour or two to map, where the healthy butternut are in the clearing area. And, it's the kind of tree that could do very well on a habitat edge. So, if there's a choice of, cutting this tree or that tree, when it comes down to it, that might be a reasonable mitigation measure. But that's really what we're anticipating is not any significant comment that would impact the current site plan, but we're just waiting to see that written recommendation to follow the bylaw.
Dave, could you go to or show the map that this application starts with, and explain how those site plans sort of line up with what you were just talking about, how it does or does not affect the zones?
Great question, because the key is not included. This is a little snapshot of the map. So the red area is what was mapped as dry oak, hickory, hornbeam forest. This is primarily, it gets very ledgy out here on the east side. So this is primarily up on top of the ridge. And then this occurrence continues up into the northern parcel. And so you can see that the current proposed site plans avoid that and include all of that in the open space parcel. And in terms of the butternut, unfortunately, Levi did not map that occurrence explicitly. That would have been ideal. But from verbal conversation, it sounds like that was primarily observed, or at least in more abundance, towards what he described as the edge of the forest blocks. So down by where the current clearing is, the home site. So I'm imagining that from his description, he found it kind of throughout this area of the forest. And so that's the best guess. And given that it's sort of a low concern species, again, it may come back that the written opinion is, it's a small amount of clearing, there's no comment. Or it may come out and say, why don't you send someone out there and just confirm, if there's a big healthy tree right on the border and you have the choice to not cut it, then
Prioritize.
leave it in place.
And the shades of that map are like pitch of what is like red versus yellow and green.
Yeah, I don't know, George, if you can comment on that. I didn't see that explicitly in key for that map. What they
those-
Those are slope grading for the steep slope and density analysis. So green would be less than 15%, yellow would be 15 to 25%, and red is steeper than 25%.
Thank you very much.
So that's that big red blotch is the ledge. That it seems like the.
Up here.
Yeah.
The pinkish, right, is the steep slopes and the red is.
The red is the mapped uncommon community.
Yeah, the orangish shade is the hickory hopcorn beam, and then the opaque red is the steep slope.
Yeah, I get it. I think different color interpretations in the room right now, but
Same on colorblind or
It
different.
shows up better on it. You know?
Yeah.
I get it.
So the other thing I'll point out, this is something that just for my ecology training I've noted is confusing for folks, and I think has maybe not been fully clarified in the past. So we're talking about the uncommon, rare, threatened, and endangered species and communities. So the dry oak, hickory, hopcorn beam forest is included in that. And then separately, Williston has a map of notable sites of ecological value that it calls unique natural communities. And that is not using the ecological definition of a natural community. It's simply referring to places that have been identified in Williston as
Should be like
having
unique natural sites or
unique
something.
ecological value. And so that's what this polygon is, Grandma Ridge. It's not saying that whole beaver tail looking polygon is a dry oak, hickory, hopcorn beam forest. It's simply saying this area has been identified as a unique ecological feature on the Williston landscape. Now, with that, there are 3 areas that were listed as ecological values with Grandma Ridge: forested uplands, and that value and concern is really addressed with the assessment of the dry oak, hickory, hopcorn beam forest. That is really the forested upland that is significant there. Vernal pools, which are located more towards the center of the area on the parcel to the north, and none were found during the habitat disturbance assessment. And lastly, wildlife habitat. I mentioned that Levi documented numerous deer stands. It's clear that wildlife use that area. It's an area of high wildlife value, but there's no additional, notes in terms of, this being Grandma Ridge that aren't already addressed by the significant wildlife habitat analysis. So all of that polygon is actually included in the open space parcel, and there are no other real comments with regards to that unique, what Williston calls unique natural community.
I said a quick question about Grandma Ridge. Is that just a name somebody gave it, or is that a geological term?
I haven't yet been able to figure that out.
Okay.
I think I need to look.
Ages across the way.
Yeah, I think the Boomhauers might know.
Okay.
There was a 2007 assessment that was done mapping out the ecological values of Grandma Ridge, and I believe that Dan Boomhauer was sort of the primary contact.
Okay.
And so I would imagine the name goes back some time. It might be sort of a family name that ended up getting attached to it, or it's possible it could be connected to a geological feature, but I haven't yet discovered that.
And my guess is that based on all of those ledges, is that when this area was deforested, it was probably a very distinctive geologic feature of Willow.
Like a mohawk.
Yeah, I mean, it really is like it's pretty cool. But now that all the trees have grown in and it's softened that approach, it's kind of like, why is that distinctive and why is that unique? It might be lost to time kind of thing. But it is some interesting geomorphology.
Yeah, it definitely is interesting geology, uncommon communities, definitely a lot of wildlife value. So it is definitely an important part of the ecological landscape of Williston. But from both by the bylaw and as somebody who has a background in ecology, the proposed site does a good job of mitigating all of the concerns there. And really it's just waiting on that letter comment from Fish and Wildlife to see if there are any additional recommendations according to what we have written in our bylaw.
Excellent. So thank you for that briefing. What exactly is the commission asked for today if we're waiting on this letter from the Fish and Wildlife Service.
So the approval of the recommendations to the DRB.
Yeah.
But is there a chance that the wetlands report will be in by the time we get the written response from Vermont Fish and Wildlife? Not having the wetlands report, that's usually something that I would
Yeah.
be looking at when considering site plans, so.
Yeah, I guess that's a question for George. I know, in the narrative letter, it was noted that no wetlands were found. But we didn't see an attached wetland report or the name of the wetland scientist. So it'd just be good to, be a requirement to get that information before DRB approval.
Yes, I didn't realize we needed a separate report other than that. My confirmation that we had a wetland biologist visit the site and no wetlands were present, so I can get a document and submit that either by the end of the week or first thing on Monday.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, George.
I'm glad to hear that no wetlands were found. That's not usually the case. So that's lucky.
Well drained, I think, is the
Mm-hmm.
key word there.
Steep. Yeah, it's a lot of steep slopes for sure.
Okay, so I guess it seems odd to me to approve something before we get the letter. Like, what if the letter comes back with a surprising note? Like, what happens then?
Then we would get it scheduled with you guys and then push the DRB meeting out
Okay.
again.
So you're basically proceeding as if the letter is not going to contain anything concerning. So the way this is written is not clear on that, then I guess.
I think that last sentence gets there.
I think that was the attempt.
Should precede DR, so that's what you're saying, the
Yeah.
Conservation Commission review should.
Let's see it again if there's like.
Right.
Amending it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the recommendations.
And if you have a suggestion for clarity, we can absolutely incorporate that.
Mhm.
If that doesn't feel, that was the intent, was with that second sentence to clarify, if any mitigation measures or further suggestions come back in the opinion, then Conservation Commission would be asked to review.
Would additional work include recommendations to adjust building envelopes?
That's the language in 27.
Just wondering what additional work means.
For example, if they said, this all sounds fine, but you really should send the ecologist back out there to map it, as, would have been hoped the first time.
Mhm.
And, apologies, but yeah, as we sort of noted that turnover, this is something we could have caught sooner. But it's just sort of.
Yeah, we don't want to slow the process down, but we do want to make sure if something concerning comes back that we see it. So I'm happy enough that this covers
Yeah,
this.
if a U trees is present, the applicant must obtain a written opinion from Vermont Fish and Wildlife indicating what measures must be taken to assure that the proposed development will not result in undue adverse impact.
Yeah.
Recommendations from Fish and Wildlife may require additional work from the applicant.
So yeah, any adjustments based on the comments would qualify as additional work. Okay.
Yeah, and again, the language there is undue adverse impact. So, given that this is a population that was found throughout the forest, given that, they're healthy trees, this isn't a circumstance where you find one rare species, that exact one has to be preserved. That's why our assumption is avoiding undue adverse impacts is probably already taken care of by the current proposal. But we just need to get that confirmation.
I'll second Laura's motion then.
Okay. I think that is clear based on that discussion, that if there's no mitigating circumstances required under that letter, then we will not see this again. It'll go directly to the DRB, but if it is, it'll come back to us. So that's clear to me. Any further discussion on the motion other than what my comments just were? All right, all in favor of approving? Aye.
I,
Opposed? No abstention because no one else is here. This motion is approved. Excellent.
thank you, Mr.
Thank you all
Fournier.
very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for.
I'd like to say that I do realize that this is a unique parcel. I've owned it for over 40 years and I enjoyed it by hunting, hiking, snowshoeing. It's a great area. I
Yeah,
appreciate your concern to respect that and develop it correctly.
yeah,
Because I too look forward to preserving that area. So thank you.
It's pretty
yeah,
special.
no, thank you, really appreciate everything you put into the project so far, and yeah, again, apologies that probably could have been a way to expedite some of this, but just the way it's gone.
I guess, well, thank you all.
Thank you, George.
Thanks,
Thanks, Emily.
Thank
for
you.
joining
Thanks,
us.
folks. Have a good day.
Appreciate your time. Have a good day.
Yeah.
You too.
Get outside.
Enjoying the 3D rendering of the property.
Thank you.
Quite unique.
Yeah, I was looking at the satellite imagery on Google Maps. I was like, wow, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
Oh, I just closed it. It's very, it's this,
Yes.
this there.
Okay.
So there's
Oh, yeah,
it's this whole section here. There's like lots of variation.
Right.
In the
yeah.
coloration and
Uh-huh.
see the
Oh, yeah,
topography.
Yes,
and,
it actually looks a lot like the Taconics,
Mhm.
in sort of like high ridge zones
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
little like.
and probably like the hydrology is probably like a lot drier in some areas than others, and that's why the forest is actually different colors, even
Right.
not just different
Yeah.
grades, but it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Different species.
That kind of feature could be anything, but like my guess is that it's probably an old exposed, fold. That is just rotted out and all of the weakest layers of rock have just been
Yeah.
sort of like.
And the glaciers may have carved out that weaker rock, the shale and stuff.
So just following up on this, I'll say this is my first time going through the conservation bylaws, and I immediately honed in on how confusing the unique natural communities.
I almost think we should rename
was.
it unique natural sites.
To the point that I think the consultant was actually confused by it, because the consultant thought that the polygon representing Grandma Ridge was Williston's mapped polygon for the dry oak popcorn beam hickory
Yeah.
forest or whatever that. And I actually think that the ecologist walked the edge of this polygon to map what he found, and had he gone off of the occurrence as noted by Vermont Fish and Wildlife, he probably would not have mapped all the way down to this bottom stretch, which is very interesting.
So there's some value there.
So there may have been value in this case, but I think in any case, I don't know what it takes to amend a bylaw. It doesn't sound very fun, but it does sound like a good long-term goal to clarify the difference.
We can send a recommendation to the planning commission. They usually lump together lots of updates so that they don't take the select board's time on minutia. And so they say like, okay, great, yep, we got it in the hopper, and then once we have enough stuff that it's worth sending, we'll send it to the select board.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. And I would probably put that on the same category as, say, like a view shed, and trying to like protect the view shed just because it's like a unique character, but. I mean, this is just a guess, but my guess is that over time, as it reforested, more of those, butternut, which may have been planted there as like, I think you said it's a food source. I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know what butternut is planted for, but it's not native. Is that?
No, it is native.
It is
It's a native species.
Okay.
It was often settlers would plant it, indigenous communities would plant it as a food source,
Right.
encourage it to grow.
Right.
It is a tree that propagates by animals eating its nutritious nut and then, moving it around the landscape. So
Right.
It's really just an extension of that ecology that people have moved it around for millennia.
Right.
But
Or just the animals.
it was also common for settlers in the area to plant butternut close to their homesteads and such. So that's why Vermont Fish and Wildlife makes the distinction that they're only interested in tracking native grown healthy populations, because so many of the butternuts we see, like they're butternut in Village Park, they have the canker, they're struggling, hopefully they'll make it, but they're not necessarily the kind of genetic stock that they're interested in sort of keeping track of.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, that was an interesting one.
Yeah.
So let's close with just talking about what folks would like to cover in future agenda items. I think ERF priority strategy needs to continue, but I would welcome some discussion around like what would be, how do people want to continue with that discussion and other topics that are brought up. And Dave, if I might ask, could you actually go to the agenda so that people can see what the possible topics are?
I'm thinking back to when we did the 2020 conservation prioritization, because this kind of feels like we're kind of just a new cycle of the same type of thing. And a lot of the work on the prioritization, in terms of like what methodology to use, and then creating the survey to collect the information from the commission, and consulting from Fish and Wildlife and other agencies to make sure that we were taking the right things into account and so on. A lot of that work had to happen behind the scenes by Melinda working offline with commission members, because meeting time is just expensive, right? We only have so much time. And it's hard to go deep in a meeting, so we're not pulling up websites and reading things. And so I sort of would suggest that probably the fastest way to get to a good result with the prioritization map stuff is to have like a person or two from the commission work with David offline on just getting it to a point where the commission can look at it on like one layer or one document on the screen and really make progress instead of like this really slow incremental progress. So it'll take us like a whole year to do it.
Great, good advice. And if we take that suggestion, what is sort of in my mind would be, I'd almost like to say, taking the work that's been done in 2020, hopefully this has a date on it, so that we know it wasn't like 1992. If we could take that from this and then looking at that priority matrix that we discussed today, a half dozen of those items, I think that could be sort of like a reasonable follow-up back to the commission. Is like, I took what we did in 2020, I looked at this matrix, this might be what a revised map could look like with like priority parcels. Honestly, like this is super confusing. The way that this is laid out to me is confusing just because I wasn't part of that 2020 discussion. And so you all understand it. Thank you, Laura.
See you, Laura.
You all might be able to read this more effectively than me, but like, it's just a little bit confusing. And I have to guess that based on if some of this discussion is that like that parcel in like the north east quadrant of the town, that might be deprioritized in this round, based on what we've all been talking about, because I don't know, but I might
Yeah,
just,
why is it dark green if we're talking about not doing it?
Right.
Like basically
Right.
the question. Yeah.
exactly, right. And I mean, and so I'm kind of interested in more of the like public facing, and I view this as like, well, if these ever come up, this would be a great thing to acquire. But I'm more aligned with what you're saying, which is like, if we're gonna have a public facing strategy to this, to say like, we might actually approach someone to say, hey, this is part of a strategic plan, would you be willing?
Right.
I'm more interested in like that, like what would that map look like? Because we're not gonna go to the
It's
northeast.
a great, I think I really appreciate your point, and I think it's making me think we're almost talking about two different strategies here. Like this map as is very useful because when subdivision occurs, when conversations have about zoning and land use, it's really helpful to look at part, a parcel or a part of the landscape and say, well, this is high priority conservation land. And these are the reasons why. But if we are gonna actively do something, have this public facing strategy, I think you're absolutely right. We probably want almost a different map and maybe a much simplified map.
Yeah. Any comments or questions on that?
I think that just listening to your comments, Dave, I think it makes me think that we should, with the next version of this, develop a one-page something to go on the back of this that says how to interpret this map.
Right, yeah.
Because like I see this, we're looking at this through different lenses, and I see this as like, oh, that northeast corner is important to conserve because there's several thousand acres there that are not developed at all.
Right.
And that's from a ecological perspective, conservation perspective, that's what I see as a very high value. But also acknowledging that access is important too for people of the town. So I guess that's what I'm thinking. Well, whatever we end up with, the next one for Conservation Commission members, at least, if not general public, in 5 years, here's what we're thinking in 2025 with this plan.
Yeah.
When I suggested people work offline, I didn't want to leave the conversation, but I sort of was thinking we need one person to represent habitat, the ecological perspective, and one person who's thinking about it, advocating for access and trails. Because those two views need to come together somehow, and there may be parcels that we say, yeah, we are gonna go out and try to conserve this, but we're not gonna try to provide any access. And there will be other places where we're like, yeah, we're gonna go out and try to do something here, but we're not trying to preserve the land, we're trying to get access. Or we're trying to get a connection for a trail. And those are two totally different goals. Yeah.
Right.
How do we marry them up?
Right. I mean, yeah, these are really good points. And I think when you look at something like this, there's sort of two strategies that often come up. One is, hey, we've got a list of 50 top parcels. Let's make some calls and see, who might be interested in conservation.
Opportunity based.
Right, just opportunity based. And
You're call on Friday afternoons.
Exactly.
That is not a Monday morning call that anyone wants to take.
Exactly. In which case, it doesn't really matter what's first or second or third or 50th. It's just kind of opportunity based.
Right.
And the second is, right, what about the messy middle? That's where you really need those, additional goals. Like, we want a connection through here, and it doesn't really matter that it's low, conservation priority, because this parcel might be the conduit that connects that path. And so then you really need a separate guiding goal that's gonna, help you craft this active strategy. That's okay, we're gonna reach out to these people for this specific reason.
That makes me think that, they don't have to be necessarily competing goals, the two different lenses that we were just talking about. They could be just separate as part of the prioritization. We have the public access goal, and these parcels would help us achieve that goal, and the larger wildlife habitat conservation goal, and these parcels would help us achieve that goal.
Yeah, where they overlap would be an example of scenario where we would try to actually purchase development rights or purchase land and put a trail on it. But if it's not ecologically super valuable, then we might just be looking at trying to purchase trail easements. And where it's ecologically valuable, but it's not valuable for access, we might be looking at a conservation easement or purchasing land, but not trying to put trails through. So it's like a spectrum of solutions that we can consider based on how it aligns with those two goals.
I like that way of thinking.
Okay, I am gonna have to
Yeah.
end the meeting at 9, and we're at time. Are there any other lists on these topics of possible future topics that we definitely want to start focusing on?
Maybe this is part of the new member orientation package bullet, but maybe not, but we led off the meeting with that look at the 1986 goal for the Conservation Commission. It seems like we should take a look at that.
No,
Maybe modernize it.
I agree. I think we need to get back to basics a little bit, as it were, because there's this concept of productivity, future productivity, balancing those, like, what are we doing to make sure that we're really productive 6 and 12 months from now versus just like constantly doing the work and just grinding through. And so if we're gonna work on the BRF and the trails and the conservation stuff, that's like a significant work item. I think we should, whatever our secondary item should be more about like investing in being able to do a lot of stuff in a few months. So I think the new member orientation packet, we're gonna have a new member or two joining soon. I think that's a good one to prioritize.
Do we have any applications in with the select board right now?
Yes, there are. I think there are 4 inquiries total. I spoke last time about one person who decided not to follow through. Then I had a very good conversation with Lynn Blevins, I believe, who is actively, pursuing the opportunity. And I think Lynn, just from my conversation, has got a lot of interests, a lot of connections to the community, a lot of passion on the subject, probably be a great event.
Is that the same Lynn that's on the sustainable wells?
Yes.
Yeah, she lives off of North Williston Road, so she lives in that sort of northeast quadrant of town.
So
And I haven't heard from the other 2.
okay.
They're interested.
I think that's right. I mean, the new orientation package, if we're onboarding potentially 2 new commissioners, I mean, and we all hope Kim's coming back, but who knows if she's been
Maybe she'll love it too much and she'll never come back.
So like I think that's wise, and I think if we could spend some time going through and coming up with a list of the things, like that's how I would envision that discussion taking place, is like these are the dozen things that we'd like to see on a new member orientation page, and then maybe see a mock-up of it in June. And then, then we can sort of put that one to bed while we're continuing to focus on the ERM. But that seems like an easy one that we can just pound out.
Yeah.
And obviously take any recommendations from you, Dave, as you're onboarding yourself, things that you think and would recommend that a future commissioner and the existing commissioner would like to and appreciate to see, including just like sections of bylaws and references that are sort of like relevant.
Yeah, that's how, I mean, one of the things that I find most valuable is just the sense of history of what the commission has been doing, has done in the past. So that there's this sense of building on foundation, as opposed to what sometimes happens with conservation commissions, where they get stuck in a cycle of kind of reinventing the wheel. But
The
I
annual
do.
reports is another place to look.
What's that?
The annual reports is another place to look. Like you can look at the last 10 years of annual reports and just pull out like a note or 2 from each one, and that would give you kind of a historical perspective, what we've been working on and why. Hopefully we don't look like we're reliving the same topics over.
Well, to a certain extent, that always happens with the topics of the topic.
Yeah.
They stay relevant for a reason.
Absolutely. Okay. And you're gonna reach out about the fence. You're gonna give me some details on whether or not I can come in and help repair the fence.
Yes, I will. So Deb mentioned second week of June being sort of preferred time.
So some time.
Loads of time.
Yeah, so there's time, and we can talk about it, be sure, but I will. My next step is just to see, are there line items that, I could pull a little bit of budget from to, order some nicer posts, signs, that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
and figure out where to go from there.
Sounds good. We'll adjourn. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
And we'll leave this map with you.
And you can take it if you like. It's like a rough
I
draft.
think that was Laura's.
It's a little.
Oh, the big map.
The
Yeah,
big
yeah.
map,
You can
yeah.
move that. You're welcome
yeah,
to
no,
take the printout if you'd like.
Did anyone do a head count for Green Up Day or participants that looked through the tent at Green Up Day?
By Emily's